Everybody, this is Madhav here from Remote Marketing, and today I'm going to talk about stakeholder management. Now, I know this is a very corporate topic, and especially from someone who comes from a hardcore startup world, it's not something I'm not very prone to corporate jargon, right? But since this show is all about remote marketing teams, we also have to address items about leadership. um, so we're going to talk about stakeholder management, specifically in a remote setup, and more specifically if you're in the marketing profession. I'll keep it as simple as that. um, and it is interesting, like that in almost every leadership job description today, you'll read some form of stakeholder management in the list of requirements, right? So, the job description will be like exceptional communication and stakeholder management skills, or it'll be something like, needs to have, the ability to have open communication with the internal and external stakeholders. And, it is interesting, but I wanted to understand really what it really means. And so, why is it like, why do companies look for advanced stakeholder management skills in leadership role candidates, right? So when I entered the first leadership position, what I understood was, as my mind matured, I realized that most leadership positions require you to collaborate cross-functionally across many departments. And if you're going to work with many departments, you need to be skilled at managing your stakeholders properly. So your projects, get executed without a lot of friction. So, let's kind of define what is stakeholder management, before we kind of go ahead, right? So instead of me taking some term from Wikipedia or something, I'm going to define it as how I understand it. It's really just the management of key people who are critical to the success of your projects, right? Stakeholders can be internal and external. Internal stakeholders are, let's say your leadership team, your cross-functional team leads, your own team, and the external stakeholders are your customers, evangelists, partners. And there are probably better definitions out there for each of them. So yeah, Google it. And the thing is, today I'm specifically going to talk about managing internal stakeholders. Okay, a more practical approach of managing stakeholders, specifically in a remote team, and from the perspective of someone who's in marketing, right? Now, when we talk about stakeholder management specifically, you can essentially break it down. I essentially break it down to just three things. Number one, managing information being shared by stakeholders. So there's a lot of information, a lot of requirements, a lot of complaints, feedback, all of that is shared. So you need to manage that properly. The second thing is managing expectations of stakeholders. Okay. And the third thing is building great camaraderie with stakeholders, building a great relationship and friendship with these important stakeholders. So I'm going to share this, see how I tackled it by kind of sharing a personal story. All right. So I've worked with many organizations in the past, both as a marketing team member, as a remote marketing team member, and as a remote, marketing team lead. And a while back, I found myself in a tricky situation. So, overnight we had this unexpected leadership change, and I found myself leading the marketing team with very little leadership experience under my belt. And so what followed was this. I became the go-to person in marketing for everyone else in the company. So if anyone had any requirement from marketing, I'd be notified about it. If anyone had any feedback to marketing, I'd be the one given the feedback. If anyone had any complaints or wanted to throw cuss words or whatever with marketing, I'd be the one that'll be responsible to be thrown those cuss words at. But most importantly, I was held accountable for our marketing goals, progress, and performance. I was the one who had to answer to the leadership team about, the monthly qualified leads, the customers, how we're growing, right? And so when this change happened, like 2 weeks later, I noticed that the number of conversations I was involved in increased significantly. I've tagged in several Slack threads, 20 email conversations every day. Um, I was tagged in a lot of comments in GitHub repositories and our project management board. And this was all across the day, right? And as a remote team, we work with global team members. So often my team communication is asynchronous, which I like. But it was overwhelming, because it wasn't uncommon for me to wake up with this, barrage of notifications. This, it would be like I'd open my phone and there'd be like 50 plus mentions on Slack, 10 plus mentions on Asana, 20 plus unread emails, where a long conversation is going. It was the perfect recipe to stress out when you wake up. So my mornings used to be just going through all of these messages and responding back to them. But the problem was that there was just so much information being shared by key stakeholders. A lot of important information that I should have been acting on also fell through the cracks because it's just so many things. So on an average, just to kind of give you a perspective of what it looked like, on an average day, I'd, let's say, get messages from our engineering director on improving our marketing launches. I'd get a message from sales to create new sales enablement materials for customers. I'd get an email from customer success team on an update on our referral program or a new customer testimonial. And then simultaneously, I'd also be pinged from, the CEO on progress on our marketing projects and how our monthly qualified leads number and other important KPIs are moving forward. Now, what happened is that with all of these information being shared, I was always in reactive mode. I was always in firefighting mode. Like things came up, I was tackling them and all of that. I wasn't taking control of these things, right? It was just like everything was thrown at me and I'm just kind of, figuring it out, and my entire workday just went past. So instead of being reactive with all of this information being shared with me and kind of managing my stakeholders this way, I wanted to be proactive and take control of the situation. So instead of always being in this firefighting mode, I wanted to actively collect information from these stakeholders, process it in my head, and then structure it in the right way to plan our marketing strategy for the coming quarters. And besides that, I also wanted to ensure that I was managing key stakeholders well. I wanted to ensure that I addressed their questions in a timely, organized, satisfactory or more than satisfactory manner. And that's when I started doing scheduling recurring monthly one-on-ones with all of my key stakeholders. So what I did was I started these monthly one-on-ones with every team lead, from customer success, sales, support, product, engineering, the leadership team. And there was an agenda for every call. All of these calls would be scheduled via Zoom, and it would be kind of scheduled for this, let's say the first Tuesday of every month, or like the first Wednesday of every month, kind of like that, just like this routine. And the agenda of every call used to look like this, all right? So you used to have just 3 items. The first item was all of the comments that they tagged me on, all the questions, requirements that they raised, concerns, feedback that they'd raised, right? Discuss it with them, address it with them, explain your point of view and say what you're acting on, what you're not acting on, define the reasons. So you're basically telling them that yes, a lot of those concerns were valid and important, or the feedback is really appreciated, and you're seriously considering their requirements, and that's why this call is being scheduled, and just kind of giving them an update. The second thing would be I get my questions answered. I convey requirements. I get an update on existing projects. This would be my turn of kind of working well with these team members, kind of asking for timelines on when this particular release is happening, or if, I can get a new testimonial from some customer, or, just all of these things. And then the third thing, which would be the more fun thing, which is one-on-one bonding time on video with these remote team members and colleagues and stakeholders. And this would be just catching up, getting to know each other well, all of that. Because I think a great, nice, light, friendly relationship, it works really well when you're working with stakeholders, because now you're working a lot more smoothly and easily. So if I could give you an example of this agenda, so this is a real agenda with my product manager on one of my monthly one-on-ones. So the first item I addressed was the feedback that shared about improving product launches process. And I addressed that. I said I'm going to build a version 2, but that's going to happen 3 weeks later. But that feedback was truly appreciated. And then there were a bunch of questions that they had raised, and I addressed that. The second thing was I asked them on the timelines for this upcoming big feature release, and if we're still on time, if you're track on to hit them, if you're not, how much is the delay? And then, I would talk to them about what's the product story, about why this feature is being built and who does it benefit, and kind of get their insights to make it easy for me to craft my marketing copy. And the last thing I would discuss with them is like how did their weekend trip go, which they had planned, and how are their guitar classes happening, and all of that stuff. And then what I did was, once I had these monthly one-on-ones and once this agenda was kind of addressed, I would then, take out half an hour and kind of just think about everything that, these are the things that they've raised. This is how I can fit it in like the coming quarter. These are the things that are probably not important right now, but could be addressed a year later. So I could, prioritize and deprioritize the things that I had, but I had time to just process all of that in one go, process all of the times with my engineering, my product manager, or with my revenue director, right? And so what I started doing was, after these monthly one-on-ones, once I've processed all this information, I actually wrote a weekly and a monthly update, detailing about, how our marketing progress is going, what we're planning ahead, and, addressing some of the concerns that these team leads had raised, and, telling, just mentioning that this is what we've decided. And this is in tune with everything that we had discussed in the monthly one-on-one, which they agreed on, right? So that was a great way to kind of process this information, put it into action, prioritize, deprioritize, and also be able to manage these important stakeholders well. So how did this benefit me, right? So the number one good thing was that I had a dedicated direct line of communication scheduled every month, with these cross-functional team leads. So that allowed us to collaborate better without being, without being bombarded with messages with each other. So instead of me or them being tagged in every convo, every other day, a lot of the items in the stakeholders' mind or my mind moved to our monthly agenda, which structured our conversations quite a bit. The second thing, how it benefited me, was it allowed me to, sufficient time to process information, to prioritize, deprioritize, which are very important things when you're a marketing leader, or team leader. And the third thing was, it allowed me to kind of gel well with my cross-functional team leads. It allowed me to kind of, have this great thing going, and it allowed us to, work together, work really well together cross-functionally, and kind of, make the process of working with each other quite smooth. And so, eventually when I see these benefits and I compare to the three things that I talked about of stakeholder management, the first one was managing information being shared by stakeholders. So that is addressed with this monthly one-on-one, where everything is put in the agenda item and you have time to address this information, collect it, and process it. Second thing is managing expectations of stakeholders. So with this call, you're basically coming on the same page with the team lead. Whatever expectations they have, they can convey it. Whatever expectations you had, you can convey it, and you can kind of come on the same ground. So this definitely helps with this process. And then the third thing was building great camaraderie with stakeholders, which happens again with this, because it's not just about a work call, it's also just talking a little bit about each other. But, this thing it just transformed. It made my life so much simpler. And I just don't believe that stakeholder management in a remote team is really just this simple. So yeah, I hope and this is something that worked for me, right? This is something that I've also seen some companies adopt. It may or may not work for you, but I would definitely, if you're someone who's leading a team and work a lot cross-functionally, it is essential for you to kind of have these monthly one-on-ones with your team leads. Yeah, but if you have anything to add here, right, feel free to email me on madhav@remotemarketing.org. And I would love to hear your thoughts, because again, I'm someone who's very new to leadership positions. I'm learning a lot. I know nothing. I'm just trying to understand as I kind of keep getting this experience. So I would really appreciate if you can give some feedback, and I would love to address that in the coming episodes. But I hope you got some value, and I hope you can manage your stakeholders if you're just starting out, or working with a remote team. All right. Thanks a lot for listening, and see you in the next episode.